Welcome to Beyond the Boardroom with Ben Bobo, a well-known entrepreneur and trailblazer who has led startup organizations for more than 15 years. Beyond the Boardroom is the only streaming video show in Orange County that interviews thought leaders from all different industries and cultures about life lessons they wish they'd learned earlier in life, covering topics that weave together the fabric of life and career, bringing you recipes for success, shared pearls of wisdom, and key life lessons for business and personal growth. Now here is your host, Ben Bobo.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Boardroom. I'm your host, Ben Bobo. We're reporting today, or coming today from cloudy Newport Beach, but we're always happy to be here. We have a very special guest, Hazim Ansari. He's the principal of Novel IP. Haz, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
You know, I got to say, I've known Haz for a while here, and he's one of the best IP attorneys I've ever come across. The way he looks at the world, the way he looks at technology, and the way he puts it together in a way that protects the company, from my experience, is pretty special. But, you know, Haz, we think about your career, your progression, and where you've gotten to in life. Can you share with the audience where it all started?
Well, I graduated with a chemical engineering degree back in 1992, and quickly realized that chemical engineering, when I went out into the marketplace, was more of advanced plumbing, right? It wasn't as interesting as I thought it was.
Right.
I was lucky enough to find my way to law school, and quickly after that found my way into intellectual property. I worked for some great firms here in Southern California. I worked with Christie, Parker and Hale, Melvin E. Myers, and got lucky in the boom years, made some money up in Northern California.
Sure.
And then I thought to myself, in the process of being part of a big firm, you quickly realize that it's actually quite difficult to write and prosecute great patent applications when you're being charged out at the kind of associate fees,
Right.
that large firms do. So I built a group in India, and we started writing patents for U.S. companies. It was very difficult at the beginning to convince people that folks in India can write patents. Then the bust happened, as you remember, in the early 2000s, and quickly people started calling back and saying, hey, it's
a great model.
It's a great model.
Right.
Can you guarantee fixed cost pricing? And we said, absolutely. So we quickly got a group of...
And you were doing IP law for small companies, startups, or?
Well, it was for anybody at the
Okay.
time that we could get. And then we quickly got a bunch of large companies signing on in the early 2000s. The group that I had, it was fascinating how quickly the model in India got commoditized. That's always an interesting process. You think that your model is going to work forever, and then it gets commoditized quickly. People saying, well, you can lower your prices, lower your prices. The beauty of it then is we had this group of people that we were able to use for other purposes, such as investing as equity or patent services. So now we end up having two parts to our business. Novel IP has two parts. One is supporting big companies in their patent programs.
Right.
And the second is investing patent services as equity in promising startups. And
So let me,
that's really the fun part.
yeah, so this is interesting. You went from chemical engineering and then you found your way to law school.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration going to law? Did you already know when you went to chemical engineering, I believe at Stanford, that you wanted to go to law school?
Well, I actually left a job in environmental engineering, went to India to do development work for a little bit. The work was fascinating. This company called Development Alternatives was taking lint from the textile plants in and around Delhi, and they needed people to create handmade paper factory plants because they would take that lint, send it out to villages, and have people in the villages actually make coasters and paper products and what have you. So they actually needed volunteers to design that. It was fun to do. While I was in Delhi, I saw farmers rioting over the WTO. And it was a really fascinating riot to see.
Farmers rioting over the World Trade Organization. What do
Exactly
they know
right.
about the World Trade Organization?
Well, they were very concerned at the time that the laws would change in India, and that plant patents would come into India and would
wipe them
restrict
out.
their
Right.
ability to use certain seeds, et cetera.
Right.
And that got me interested in intellectual property. which then led me to saying, oh, what the heck, let me go to law school. And I was lucky enough to go to Loyola Law School here in LA.
That's a great story. So as you went through this process, eventually getting to novel IP, did you face any hurdles in that process where, whether it be chemical engineering to law school to beyond, that you looked at and said that was a really difficult hurdle, or is just par for the course?
I haven't, I've been lucky in my life that I haven't had hurdles along the lines of whether it be physical, whether it be financial. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship from Loyola. The main hurdles, I'd say, were my own mental attitude towards either law or certain fields. I had these preconceived notions of what being a lawyer is, preconceived notion of what intellectual property is. And only after really engaging in the legal field and realizing, well, you can make of it whatever you want, particularly in the intellectual property field,
Right.
that the options really expanded, and I sort of found my way. One of the things that I tell people very often is that if you want your kid to become a lawyer, don't have them intern in a law firm. Don't have them go follow a lawyer. Don't do that.
You get locked in the wrong paradigm.
Because
right.
you get locked in a paradigm of, oh, I have to sit with these boxes.
Right.
And that's all I'm going to be doing for the next 30 years of my life. That's not the case, right? You find your way.
It's open, expansive. So last time we talked, you said something really kind of interesting. You said that the best doesn't always equal the best answer or person. So you have these really high pedigree colleges, universities, Stanford, Harvard, in law. And then as you went into these large law firms, you recognize that they only wanted the best and brightest. And that you said that the best and brightest don't always come up with the best and brightest ideas.
Well, see, it goes to the nature of creativity in general. One of the great regrets that I've had in my life was not realizing that there are many forms of intelligence, right? Realizing that because people look at the world differently, there are different perspectives, it is that diversity of perspective that leads to fantastic creative solutions.
Right.
What happens when you get a bunch of really smart people who go through largely the same institutions is that you often get people thinking the same way. It's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's the same, right? And having a bunch of people thinking the same way isn't necessarily the best way of getting to the right answer,
Yeah.
right? A great example is one of the companies we helped start back in 2008, 2009. It's a company called Endostim. They're now commercial in Europe. They're in FDA trials here. A lot of scientists thought that if you're going to treat gastroesophageal reflux disease, you had to stimulate the esophageal sphincter,
Right.
and you had to sense for swallow, so you knew when to stop the stimulation. Because if you didn't, people would choke.
Right.
Well, this one physician, not coming from necessarily the most pedigreed universities here, but incredibly bright and from India, he realized, well, wait a second, that's not necessarily the case. That in fact you can have different parameters established in stimulation that, if you do it right on a per patient basis, will result in the person being able to swallow through stimulation. You don't have to sense. It completely changed the paradigm for this particular solution. But it didn't come through convention. It came out of left field. And it's appreciating those sources of knowledge that I think really has expanded my world.
So as you look back and you eventually started Novel IP, you came from a big firm to Novel IP. What compelled you to start your own firm?
Oh, flexibility. The biggest challenge in a big firm, and again, I've worked with fantastic firms. So I'm a big fan of O'Melveny. I'm a big fan of Christie, Parker, and Hale. But when you have partners and legitimately they need to have established paradigms for how you choose to invest in startups and how much leeway you give financially to a startup, it's very difficult sometimes to demonstrate to partners why you should take a leap of faith in a particular group of people. Maybe they don't have the track record. Maybe they don't have big funding. Maybe it's just your gut that's telling you that these people are people worth taking a risk on. I personally didn't want to be limited And so we went off and built our own.
What was that challenge like to start your own firm? I mean, you obviously had some capital, you had some money, but taking that sort of leap of faith, going from a big, known certainty kind of firm to something much smaller, banking on your perception of where talent comes from, where ideas come from, and how you can sort of accelerate those ideas.
Right.
What was that like as you think about starting your own firm? What were some of the challenges? Was there any roadblocks, major headwinds, or?
Well, I was thankful that I was much younger and at the time. I mean, when I was building a group in India, so I was doing all the work for clients that I can get in the United States, at the same time flying every 6 weeks to India to work with them and train them for 2 weeks, and then flying back. It was extremely challenging, just the jet lag.
Were you married at the time?
I'm sorry?
Were you married at the time?
Yes.
With kids?
It was just before, I started just before we had our first child. And it was fascinating because I thought to myself, okay, I can keep doing this. And then when you have to leave your kid, you're like, oh, I don't know how long I can keep doing this. But luckily, the internet bust happened. And so a lot of companies called back and said, you know what, we really want fixed patent pricing. And it allowed us to quickly get a lot of clients here. And I was lucky to hire here. And what's fascinating is if you try to plan it all out and you say to yourself, okay, I have to go from here to there, let me think about every single step along the way, it's incredibly daunting.
Right.
It's crazy. What you really got to do is just think, all right, what do I have to do over the next 3 days or next week or next month?
Right?
Yeah, you got to just chunk it out. You can't try to plan out every step. Yeah.
So when you think about the Patent Trade Office as a patent attorney, and you have this company with an idea, and you go to file the provisional patent, eventually go to utility patent, what is the biggest challenge for a small company coming to your firm saying, we've got this idea and we want to patent it, as it pertains to the PTO office? I mean, what does a PTO office look for in small company, big idea propositions?
Well, there are a lot of elements to that question, right? The first thing is, what's the biggest challenge to a small company? The biggest challenge is that their business will almost certainly not be the same in 2 or 3 years as what it is when they're coming to you on that day.
Right.
And it's just a natural function of the fact that people's knowledge limited, right? They take guesses at the market, they take guesses at technology, and all that guessing is going to result in not being 100% accurate.
Right.
So you can file a bunch of great IP on day one, and 3 years later, none of it may be relevant. So one of the first challenges is to sit down with a group of people and start questioning assumptions. Sometimes you have inventors who are very reluctant to go through that process of questioning their base assumptions about the market. I know you're building your platform assuming X company and Y company are the primary competitors, but what if there's a standardization process? And as you go through all those iterations, some people resist, in which case you know that maybe there may not be the best people to invest in.
And maybe not the best fit.
Maybe not the best fit. Some people really grab onto it and they run with it. And in those scenarios, you end up building a portfolio, a patent portfolio that will withstand the changes that your company will go through because you've thought through all of that. So we end up filing very large patents. I mean, we file 100, 200-page patents.
Right.
Because of all that iterative thinking. We kind of want to future-proof the IP, right? Based upon all the changes that are going to happen in the market and in your business. So that, as far as what the PTO is looking for, on the one hand, the standards that you read are relatively straightforward. They're black and white. It's, does the prior art disclose what you're trying to claim as your invention? The prior art meaning the stuff that came before you, right? Mm-hmm. Is that disclosing what you're claiming or making it obvious, right? So that's sort of a very straightforward black and white standard. But the reality is that every examiner
there's gray and
thinks of it differently, and what is obvious to one isn't obvious to another. And so what I found is examiners want to hear a good story, right? They want to hear a good story that perhaps is a little unexpected, but relatable, right? Most examiners really know the stuff in their category, right? In their field, in their art unit.
Right.
And as a result, when they hear a story that kind of strikes them as being new, they actually get excited by it. I mean, I've talked to examiners who really want to help a company. I haven't met many examiners at all that are, take pleasure in destroying a company's IP and prospects.
So a story is really powerful. It was funny. I was reading the other day where they did this study with items they bought, and they bought 200 items, and they bought them off eBay for a total of $129, and they ended up selling them for $8,000 because they hired 200 writers to write a story on each object that they purchased.
That's a brilliant.
And the power of a story, right? And what you're saying is the power of a story in energizing IP and being flexible with the IP as you iterate as a company is really important. It sounds like what the reviewer at the PTO office would really want in their perfect world.
Well, I've seen what you've done with your company and the story that you're building. I think you're extremely good at getting people excited about a story, and which is a mark of a very exciting entrepreneur. If you can't get people excited about your story, it's very difficult to raise money.
Right.
It's very difficult to get a patent. It's very difficult to do anything, get people hired, right?
Right.
So it's fun to meet people who not only can manufacture that story, but are intrinsically believing in it and excited by it, right? So
absolutely. One of the things we do in this board, Beyond the Boardroom, is, in my experience in life, we all have a board of directors in our lives that are seen or unseen, personal friends, mentors in business. There are people that have shaped our worldview, our lives to some degree. And as you think about it, and your board of directors, who would you say is the one or two most important people you've come across that's really impacted your worldview, your life, your business view in your career thus far?
Well, he's not on my board, but a fellow by the name of Rod Dorman was one of the first attorneys that hired me coming out of law school. And he's a fantastic litigator. He's semi-retired with a firm called McCool Smith Hennigan. And he just had a lot of pieces of wisdom that in the course of going through the aches and pains of being a young lawyer were incredibly valuable. I remember one time I was at the firm very late, and he showed up, I think picking up his car after having dinner, and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And I told him, I'm really concerned because there's this massive document production, and I'm afraid the judge is not going to like the fact that we're objecting to this and that. And so he asked me, well, how many interrogatories? What have they asked for? And I told him, he goes, do you think that's reasonable? I go, no, I don't think that's reasonable. Because what you have to learn in your career is that you have to figure out what's fair. And when you figure out what's fair, you draw that line and you stand by it. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes you'll lose. But if you think something's not fair, draw that line, stand by it, and see what happens. And it was very helpful to me to realize that I really didn't have a choice. I had to draw that line because if I lose, I learned that my line is not accurate. I learned how to hone that line for myself. If I'm correct, well, I've made my life easier, right? So it was advice like that that really improved my career pathway.
And you think about when you first get into your career to have the gift of a mentor boss at an early stage that can speak into your life and really give you a lot of insight to start develop the groundwork and the foundation of your career is very special, because we know as you go forward in time that you always don't have those kinds of bosses. There's a lot of Machiavellian, there's a lot of different personalities in the law profession or business profession. So what a gift.
It's true, because in the legal world, you can run into people that will abuse you as a young associate, right? If they don't manage their time well, then they want you to be staying on a Friday night managing document production.
And paying the price for their...
And paying the price for it. If you're lucky and you find the right person, then you get a lot of words of wisdom that will help you make the right decisions. And that's one of the biggest sources of tension and anxiety you have as a young professional is just not being certain that your decision's right.
Right.
You know, not having the gut to know, well, I have to go in X direction because Y direction's not going to lead me anywhere positive. And the beauty of getting older is because you've grown that gut, you don't have the kind of anxiety anymore. I have to go X, I have to go. You're more clear on the direction.
And the benefit of experience.
Right.
So when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to talk to Haz about his big passion, which is an Inventors Club. And so more after this message from our sponsor.
Serenitex is focused on eliminating the biggest challenge to migraine management, namely the subjective diagnosis of migraines and standard migraine drug therapy that results in undesirable effects and unproven results. Healthcare and lost productivity costs from migraines is $78 billion a year, and employers lose 113 million lost workdays from migraines. But did you know that more than 95% of those with chronic migraines have never sought help, received a diagnosis, or been treated? Serenitex has discovered a patentable technology solution for the non-invasive detection and screening of migraines. We've tested our approach on actual migraine patients, and it works. To learn more, visit serenitex.com.
Welcome back. We were talking before break that Haz has a really big passion, and it's called the Inventor Club. And when he told me about it, I was really impressed because it really expounds on the notion that you don't find all the great ideas at the universities, at the pedigree university, but sometimes you can find them with teenagers and really early young people that know what the problem is, are trying to solve it, and the older people like us haven't figured it out yet. So, Haz, what is that big passion you have, or the Inventors Club you mentioned?
Well, I have to first give kudos to my kids, who are the ones who really developed this idea. They're the ones who said, you know, the process of coming up with inventions, of creatively thinking about problems, is one that we've tried and done in our house since they were children. But that they want to expand to other people. So one of the fantastic things is I get to go to a local high school. Right now I go to my daughter's Sage High School. And we teach kids how to think about the world around them in order to come up with inventions. And there are very defined techniques for doing that. A lot of times people think that creativity, you're just born with it. Inventiveness, you're just born with it. I think it's pretty well established that there are mental techniques you can do to actually bring out that creativity and inventiveness. And so we go through, whether it be the Stanford Design School approach or the MIT Media Lab approach.
Right.
All of these are available approaches that are taught and you can use to actually develop those inventions.
So you're saying you don't have to be born with the creativity. You can actually develop a mind and eyesight and a way of developing that creativity in most people.
Well, in fact, a lot of times people have the foundations for an invention. They don't realize it. For example, one of the techniques we talk about is underappreciated psychology, meaning that there are things that people do and they don't realize why they do them. But if you can identify it and make it explicit, you can potentially change entire business models. Here's an example. There's a great Vox video out there about Instagrammable spaces. One thing that we realized by Instagram, for example, was that people love taking photos. They love it. They love taking photos. They love posting it.
Peel's Olympic system, right?
There you go. And so, you know, when we were going to museums years ago, the rule was you can't take photos.
Right.
Right? Well, what people realize is because people love to take photos, you can completely change the attendance dynamic at a museum by creating Instagrammable spaces.
Right.
And this video goes through, it's a very fascinating analysis of the attendance level changes by simply taking a museum, a boring, staid old museum,
And exposing it.
and creating Instagrammable spaces.
Right.
Changing the entire financial model for these organizations, right?
Fascinating.
It was something that is obvious in retrospect. Obviously, that's something that would be successful, but nobody did it until relatively recently, right? It's an underappreciated psychology that they made explicit, saying, don't come here and sneak photos. Look at this amazing space. I think the Brody Museum in LA sometimes has lines out the door waiting to get in and take photos of their Instagrammable spaces.
You know, it's amazing how many businesses are stuck in the tried and true, the old paradigms, and it takes the younger generation, the millennials,
Right.
with new technology to radically transform what a business model could be and its potential. So as you think about your career looking back, one of my pet peeves is recipes for success. Things I could have known 10, 15 years ago to make me that much more effective that certainly I'm learning later in life. And to me, life's all about learning as much as you can, as quickly as you can. But can you identify one or two recipes for success that were shared to you in your career that just transformed it? And you look back and said, man, if I would have known that sooner, that could have made a big difference.
I'll tell you, one of the things that I found extremely challenging early on was that I said to myself, I'm going to take these equity bets in these companies. And well, how do I know what company to take an equity bet on? I'm not a market analyst. Do I need to go out and do these complicated analyses, financial modeling, et cetera? How is this company going to be successful? And well, piece of advice that I got was that sometimes you're really just not betting on the model. You're just betting on a group of people.
Right.
And which is tried and true with VCs, right? They look at the skill set of the team, and they have faith that this team is going to be able to pivot and change and deal with whatever comes up.
Right.
I just want to know, are these handshake people? Are these people that I can work with on a handshake and know that they'll treat me well and I'll treat them well?
Right.
And I found that by more than anything else has led to success. If you deal with people that keep their word, they may not be successful the first time, right? They may not be successful the second time, maybe the fifth time, but that fifth time, they'll treat you well, and hopefully you guys will be able to reap the rewards of it, right? You kind of have to invest in people, particularly good people.
Right.
And finding good people is
the art.
Is the art. It really is. It makes life a lot easier because I'm very humble to know I don't know if this product is going to be successful. I have no idea.
Right.
But I do know this person is somebody I'm going to want to know in 10 years,
right,
in 20 years.
And you'll take that, because it's true, because venture capital companies, they don't invest in technology, they invest in management teams. There's no doubt about it. So that's great insight. So tell me something that's true, that you believe to be true, that almost nobody agrees with you on.
Wow. Well, I will say that people agree with this in the macro, but not in the micro, right? So in the macro, my answer to you is that whatever your assumptions are that you believe to be absolutely true will be completely wrong in the context of building your business. Now, in the macro, people buy that. But when you talk to somebody who's building a business and they say, well, I'm building my platform on X, and you say, well, I know you're assuming X is going to be the end all be all for the next 3-4 years, right? But what if XYZ happens? Oh, that won't happen.
Right.
That won't happen. Okay, well, your entire model is built around this concept, and it's entirely an assumption.
Right.
If you're not willing to face the fact that those assumptions will almost certainly be wrong, then it's going to be very difficult to invest in you from a business perspective.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
It's going to be a bumpy ride.
One of the things I remember in the Air Force, they said is flexibility is the key to air power. And flexibility is the key in business, especially startups, because you do start with a set of assumptions, but you really got to be open to, you have a clear idea and a pathway, but there's things going to hit you on the sides,
right,
that are seen and not seen. And part of it's getting a good team around you to make sure, whether it's R&D, manufacturing, IP law, that you have enough experienced people to say, hey, watch out. There's some gotchas, there's some blind corners, or there's some potential pitfalls. So,
and a great example of in so many times people have said, well, if you build it, the market will come, right? In biomed devices, particularly. Well, okay, if it is another piece of machinery in the OR, right? And a doctor may like it, but have you actually talked to hospital administrators? Is there space for this machine? You're making
is there a budget? Is there a budget? Reimbursement?
Yeah. Reimbursement is another very big one that first-timers in the biomed space often ignore, right? Yes, people will buy it. Well, it takes a lot to get to reimbursement. It's not a simple thing. So it's the assumptions. Every business gets built requiring assumptions. But the good business people are the ones that recognize what those assumptions are and are ready for them to be wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can go back in time and give yourself advice, what would it be?
It would be, number one, question the assumptions and invest in good people. I would have told myself that at the very beginning, right? I learned that much more, I would say about a decade ago. But if I would have learned that earlier, I think I would have been vastly more successful faster.
Right?
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to tell the audience that we haven't covered?
I think if I was going to say one thing to the audience, it would be everyone that I've talked to has an idea. And that idea they might find to be crazy, they might find to be perhaps unconventional. They should not be afraid of running after it, of finding people that will buy into it, and to explore it. Because a lot of times that instinct is right. And you just have to find the right population, the right people to buy onto it with you.
And that is the art and the trick.
It is the art.
For sure.
So,
where can they find out more about you?
you can go to our website, www.novelip.com,
Okay.
and you can take a look there.
Fantastic. He's one of the best guys. You won't be disappointed. So thanks, Haz, for coming on today. Had a great conversation. That's it from Beyond the Boardroom. I'm Ben Bobo. Today's wardrobe was provided by John Barbados, South Coast Plaza. And we just launched our website, beyondtheboardroomshow.com. Check it out. You know, the great thing about the website is it has a great aerial view of Newport Harbor. So very relaxing to look at. And until next time, remember, becoming is better than being.
When we founded Stradling in 1975, we made a commitment to helping our clients to succeed and create opportunities for business growth throughout California and beyond. Our people share cutting-edge focus in guiding the critical transactions and disputes of our clients. And we've developed a deep bench of contacts and resources to get the job done. As trusted advisors to technology, life science, software, and medical device companies, we've invested in building our expertise, developing the best of legal talent, and the readiness to serve the business community. From our commitment to our clients to our deep involvement in the communities we serve, we understand our job is your success.
This video was brought to you by 800 Cameraman, Southern California's only 20-time National Emmy Award-winning production company.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Boardroom. We look forward to bringing you more thought-provoking episodes again real soon, and look forward to your feedback and remarks. If you have any particular topic or person you would like to have us cover or interview, please reach out to us at ben@beyondbobo.com. Till next time, may you continue to map your own path to success.